Brew Strong is brought to you by Blickman Engineering, home of the Riptide. Visit them online at blickmanengineering.com.
Brewers, it's time for the beer radio you've been looking for. This is the show that dispels myths, tackles the toughest topics, and makes no apologies for geeking out on beer. Hosted by two guys that drink before they think, Jamil Zainasheff and John Palmer. This is Brew Strong.
Hey, howdy. Hey, my brewing brothers and sisters. I'm Jamil Zainasheff.
I'm Travis Campbell.
And I'm Mike Persine, and you're listening to Brew Strong.
God. There you go. This is the kind of quality intro we need for our new sponsor. Well, not our new sponsor, our continuing sponsor. Drew at blickmanengineering.com. The wonderful folks there. They sticking with us. Our dear friend John Blickman is semi-retired, and Drew has taken over the reins and is continuing to make all the wonderful products that Blickman Engineering is known for and create some new interesting stuff. One interesting thing they're working on right now that they've been producing is their 3-barrel electric system for small craft brewers. Fits through doorways, easy to install, easy to put in just about any venue where you're going to set up your brew pub. They got it for you. So check them out, blickmanengineering.com, and send a nice email to Drew. You can send it to feedback at blickmanengineering.com. Tell them you appreciate they're paying for the show, so you don't have to. You get to listen to this for free on the interwebs.
Innovate your brew day.
Innovate your brew day.
There you go.
With Blickman Engineering.
Absolutely.
Yes, that was Jason Petros' marketing idea or marketing thing, and I thought it was genius.
Yeah, I can't believe they didn't pick it up.
Right. Innovating your brew day. I don't know if anybody else is using it, but I'd use it if I were me, if I was had the chance.
If I had the brains.
I have the brains. If I had the strength to run another business, I'm using all my strength right now to writing the books.
There you go.
Just finished the modern homebrewing with my buddy Andy Parker from Elusive Brewing in England. That is going to hit the shelves September of this year, just a few months away.
Awesome.
Which seems really quick to me, but they are going to have it. It's going to be ready. So look for that in your finer book retailers. Today we are talking about stuck fermentations. I know when I was starting out homebrewing, I had stuck fermentations. It happens. And it's a pain in the butt. That's really what drove me towards learning a lot more about fermentation.
Yeah.
Stuck fermentations. So Travis, you got a lot of knowledge in this area. Tell us, what is a stuck fermentation?
Basically, a stuck fermentation is when the yeast have stopped fermenting earlier than they should have, leaving behind more unfermented sugars than normal, than expected, maybe, but than you would have liked for sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so how do we know that a fermentation is stuck? Tell me, how do I determine that I've got a stuck fermentation?
Well, I'm trying to think back through when you first start with your brewing process. it's entirely going to be sensory. It's going to be by flavor. You're going to taste your beer, and it's not going to taste like it's dried out. It's going to be a little heavy, a little sweet.
Mm.
As you get more advanced, you should be taking gravity measurements for sure. And if your gravity hasn't dropped in the range of the yeast as expected, as printed on the yeast pack in that range, that's probably a stuck fermentation. That's, I guess, the two ranges of it. There's various ways you can figure out that final gravity, such as having like a tilt or a pill float in your fermenter telling you it's not even close to done, but you don't have any bubbles coming out anymore.
Okay. So I don't see any bubbles happening or the airlock's not moving. And I take a taste or I take a gravity reading and it's higher than what my recipe anticipated. I mean, if I'm close, is that good? Or is how many points away from if I'm just like one specific gravity point off?
Yeah, you're
all
you're
that
done.
good?
You're done. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Good job.
Because it could be an error in measurement, either on the finishing side or on the original side. Maybe when I took my original gravity reading, it was a little warmer. The wort was a little warmer. I didn't quite adjust for it, and it was actually 1 point higher than I thought. Right.
Absolutely.
That's what the importance.
I could throw in there too. Like I think one of the other ones that would be a major indicator of stuck is plenty of acetaldehyde still remaining. I mean, your fermentation is kind of just frozen and hasn't finished, and so you have these diacetyl precursors or even diacetyl, and then acetaldehyde, like that kind of real astringent green unripe apple, if you will, that is just indicators that those yeast have kind of been have not completed their job.
Right. Now, I'd say if you're 5 points, you're definitely probably got a stuck fermentation.
If you're 5 points on the kit you bought from the shop, that still might have been about as good as you could do. Is probably how you handle fermentation. If you're 10, 15 points, I'd say that's clear signs of stuck fermentation.
Yeah. Okay. I usually think if you do the alcohol calculation and you're over 0.5% or even 1% lower than you thought you were going to get, you're in trouble.
Well, and that might depend on the beer. If you're doing an ordinary bitter and you're 1% off, maybe 25% fermentation.
Yeah, there you go. That's way off. Yeah.
If you're doing a imperial stout or a strong Belgian, and then maybe it's 10%. Yeah. Well, and sweetness doesn't necessarily mean stuck fermentation. It means could be if you're doing a new recipe or something like that, could be just off in the in the recipe. Maybe you used way too much crystal malt or something like that. Would you say that's a possibility?
For the flavor of sweetness, yes. The way I like to tell is I like to do a forced ferment test.
Mm-hmm.
And what that is, you pull a sample off of your wort as it's just starting to ferment, and you put it warmer, not like in an oven, but room temp, and you let it run out. Give it some shakes, treat it kind of like a starter a little bit, and however far that ferments out, your beer should come close.
Mm-hmm.
And compared to that, I'd say a couple points tops.
Right. Yeah, a small bit off, because forced ferment should really ferment as much as the beer is possible.
Yes. Holding
it warmer, shaking it, things like that, getting it to accelerate fermentation. Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Forced ferment really is a great way of telling if you've got a new recipe that you're creating, you've never brewed it before, you think based off of using a tool like Beer Smith or something like that. It's anticipating this is probably what it should ferment out to. It's probably pretty close, but you never can tell until you actually ferment it out. Force ferment is a great way. A lot of people never do force ferment tests on recipes that they create, and they don't really know how much it should be truly fermenting out. And so you run across people with very sweet beers that are like, oh, check this out. How do you like my recipe? And you're just like, wow, that is something. So force ferment, great idea.
That is something.
Yeah. So what I do, so fermenting in a conical, I know that's not necessarily typical, but a lot of people are using more advanced hardware these days. It's definitely not necessary, but I will put more in my conical than I need, knowing that once fermentation kicks off, I'm going to draw half a quart out, and let that be my force ferment. I get to drop my trube, anything that transferred over, plus some wort, and let that finish out. That's my force ferment. Because when you only have 5 gallons and you don't want to pull samples necessarily, because that's beer you're wasting beer. That's precious beer you've worked for. So put a little extra in. You don't mind taking it out.
Yeah, I agree. But a lot of homebrewers aren't gonna. I mean, I don't really do force ferments, to be honest, because it hasn't been an issue. But I could see if you're having like a consistent concern, or even proven beers that haven't finished or they're not to style, that would be like that kind of quality check that you should probably institute to make sure that that is not the issue. And so for me, like, I have problems with other things. Like I have beers I want to be bright that are hazy, and like, so then I'm working on that and I'm doing quality stuff for that. But I can see though, for those who didn't do that and started out, the big ones are the flavor is the dead giveaway. And then as I was thinking about it, you guys were talking, I think 8 to 10 points above where you thought it was is probably it didn't attenuate the way it was supposed to, and it did partially or completely stick.
There you go. All right, let's do this. Let's take a short break, and when we come back, let's talk about some of the causes of a stuck ferment. We'll be back with that right after this.
Are you looking for a simple brewing system that's great for all grain brewing, but everything on the market seems to be full of compromises? Blickman Engineering has the answer. The Blickman Brew Easy All Grain Brewing System. The Brew Easy is a complete system with easy upgrades and a beautiful compact design, perfect for any size brewing location. At its core, the Brew Easy is built on 2 gorgeous Blickman Boilermaker brew kettles, a high-temperature March pump, and either a top-tier gas burner or the new Boil Coil electric heater. The Brew Easy adapter lid allows the pots to stack on top of each other, forming an efficient, strong, and compact brewing setup that comes in 5, 10, and 20-gallon batch sizes. Upgrade your Brew Easy system with full automated control by adding a Blickman Tower of Power temp controller, and make moving around easy with the Blickman Kettle Cart. The Brew Easy is modular. If you already own a Boilermaker kettle, you can build your Brew Easy by purchasing just the modules you need. The new Brew Easy all-grain brewing system. See it today at BlickmanEngineering.com and brew with Blickman quality on your new Brew Easy.
Back to the 2 guys that know how to turn beer into beer. This is Brew Strong.
All right, we're back. We're watching Mike Vogue here.
Gotta do something during those commercials.
Right.
It's a little added bonus for the live,
That's right. If
live listeners, you get the weird mic camera stuff.
There is a benefit
Not that weird
to watching live, or I guess you can go to Facebook and watch the video as well, even after.
So the Facebook ones don't ever have the commercial break, just us pausing, correct?
Correct.
So there's not a video version where a commercial would be inserted. So Mike's Vogue is going to live forever.
Yes.
All right.
That is a fact. Until the end of the world, Mike's going to be there voguing away.
Pretty much somewhere in the interweb.
Yeah. I mean, there's many times to see that, just do a Google search and you'll see. All right. So we're talking about stuck fermentations. And just before the break, we were going to talk about the causes of a stuck fermentation. So what causes a stuck ferment?
I'd say probably the number one cause is your yeast pitch, either not large enough or not healthy enough for the beer you're trying to make. And both of those are relatively easy. I mean, you walk into a homebrew shop, and even though they make more money the more yeast they sell you, they hand you a pack of yeast and say, this is fine, just use this, just pitch it straight. So yeah, I would say, your yeast pitch size and health.
I was going to say a stuck fermentation is like a fermentation that just got out of a breakup and is still stuck on that. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
We'll start over. No, I was going to say too, that associated with, I think, your yeast selection can leave you vulnerable to yeast stick. Like, so strain can have a lot to do with it. I've listened to a lot of really interesting people talk about certain strains like London Fog have a propensity to not attenuate properly because they're not very good at assimilating maltotriose and those slightly more complex sugars that if you have a lot of those in your mash and you've chosen and your process just has produced a lot of those and you use a yeast that can't really deal with them, you're going to have problems with attenuation. And so I've learned that the hard way with Boddingtons. And so when I mash, I'm all dry all the time. I'm trying to get that thing down to maltose, glucose if I can. So that's another factor, is even the strain of the yeast you're using. You need to be careful. I know a lot of British ales will have a propensity to under attenuate if you're not on it with other things like even oxygenation. So health, pitch rate, strain, and then oxygen too can really help.
Absolutely.
I was even going to say too, temperature, because I've seen a lot of White Labs has put a lot of really cool graphs and charts with yeast growth over time and temperature. And so temperature can be big for yeast growth. So even if you do pitch the right amount and you're too cold for that selected strain, you could have yeast growth issues, and then you're not as having a healthiest fermentation as you should, and then things end early.
Speaking about yeast health, Travis, what about like nutrients? Say I think people get stuck fermentations mainly in bigger beers. I mean, that's one of the reasons you mentioned, pitch rate. When you're fermenting a bigger beer, it's harder to pitch enough healthy, viable yeast. So, and then nutrients play a role in that, don't they?
Absolutely. And there's a bit of argument about are your nutrients helping this batch or the next batch? And I tend to believe it's helping both batches. Your wort's going to provide a lot of what you need, especially on your, let's call it average beer. But most of us try to push the limits of every beer we make in one direction or another. And adjuncts are kind of a bigger thing than it used to. I mean, when I started home brewing, which wasn't forever ago, you wouldn't think of using something like rice in your beer. Mm-hmm. Now there's styles, like that aren't lagers where, like a cold IPA or so, where you use flaked rice or flaked corn. So you're not going to have as much from the malt as you would. So your free amino nitrogen, your fan will be a little bit low. And you can add some of that with most of your typical yeast nutrients are going to have something that provides that back in. Jamil, is that part of what comes with the Saccharomyces or the Saccharomyces that's in that kind of nutrient? Are you aware? Is that where you get your fan?
No, servo. Well, I guess there would be some in there. Servo is yeast that was kind of put in a high zinc environment, I think, that took up a lot of zinc. and then it's killed. So it's dead yeast with zinc. So there are some amino acids that are in there. The yeast, what the yeast had in them, definitely. Some free amino nitrogen. You can add, some amino acids. You can, add zinc. Oxygen is a big one when you're trying to get enough healthy yeast to make it through a big fermentation, and multiple doses of oxygen. I always say, anytime you're like doing a 1080 beer or higher, you definitely should be doing a second dose of oxygen. You let the yeast grow, and then you hit it with a second dose of oxygen, and it helps them add to their cell membrane pliability and keep them so they can do a higher alcohol environment. A lot of people get stuck, like I said, on big beers and high alcohol. And the reason is the yeast aren't healthy enough to resist the toxicity of the alcohol, the osmotic pressure of the high sugar environment. So making sure you got the healthiest yeast and providing them all the tools they need to survive and ferment will help them get through fermentation to the end.
Yeah, so Jamil, you've been telling us all about the 1080 for quite a while now. I believe you recommend closer to 1070 for certain English ale yeast, though. Is that correct?
A lot of the English ale yeasts, they really need additional oxygen. And, I knew about this, but I never really put two and two. Sometimes I'm slow. I don't know if you know this. You've been hanging out with me for quite a while.
Hey, we're beer drinkers. I don't know if you know this.
But a lot of the traditional British fermentation methods, for example, the double drop, really, a big part of that. I was talking to John Keeling, and I was asking him, it's very specifics about the double drop. And when they dropped it from the upper fermenter down into the square below, it went through a sintered pipe. What sintered is, it has a whole bunch of little holes in it, like a sintered, carb stone. Yeah,
mm-hmm. Yeah.
So as it goes through a sintered pipe, it's drawing in air and mixing it into the beer. So it's really super oxygenating it. Or aerating it in this case.
That's not as bad as I pictured, because I pictured they were just dropping it in an open environment.
I think some of them.
It's a pipe.
I think some of them did that, where it was just like
splash.
Yeah.
More
aggressively splashing it. Yeah.
I mean, in my water treatment experience, just opening that and pouring that out, overflowing into an open tank or that's going to aerate, almost saturate it. It's going to be pretty close. So
splashing really helps. So they would do this, and then open square fermenters, and if it wasn't that, they would pump it over, arouse it. So they would take a pump and pump the wort back up into like a little fountain into the wort. And there's places that do that today. There's a few that have a double drop, but many more of them pump it around, and they'll pump it for a certain number of hours. They'll get like 8 or 12 hours or 24 hours in, and then they'll pump it around for a certain number of hours. And again, that adds a lot of oxygen, because a lot of these yeasts have trouble really fermenting out on a lot of beers. They've really become accustomed to having plenty of oxygen. So when you're using at Heretic, when we were brewing, like a 14% hazy, you had to oxygenate the holy living crap out of it, because there was no way those yeasts would ferment out otherwise.
And that's using pure oxygen, not air, because air will get you to like 7 ppm, whereas oxygen can get you 20 plus.
Yeah, air can get you to 8, 9.
I guess depending on the temperature and atmosphere, like what elevation you're at. But Where I
Well,
live, 7's kind of the saturated.
yeah.
8.
But you could use the air up. We said it twice, 3 times, 4 times. I mean, you're risking contamination, but you're also risking your beer not finishing.
Right.
So I mean,
Yeah.
there's compromises to be made if you're not ready to buy the oxygen tank and the special little adapter. And the 1 ounce bottles at Home Depot don't last very long and
Right.
aren't a good value for your money.
Yeah, they have sterile filters, inline sterile filters. More Beer sells them.
I wasn't thinking of the air. I was thinking about the opening and the injecting of it and the wand just stick in there being covered in stuff, not so much the
yeah,
air.
or splashing. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, with oxygen, yeah, one of the things is, you can super saturate a liquid, and people go, oh, you can't. The saturation of oxygen in wort is like 10 parts per million, something like that. It's like no. You can kick that up to 20. You can super saturate a liquid, and once it's super saturated, it takes much longer for it to become desaturated to return to kind of an equilibrium. So it's plenty of time for the yeast to take it up. We long ago we used to talk about no, it's not doing any good to try and do more. You can't really get any more oxygen in there, but you actually can. Yeah, Travis, talk to me about temperature control and how that affects the stuck fermentation.
Yeah, so Mike was talking about growth up front, which is extremely important. But the other half of it is, and the half that most of us don't do when we first start brewing, is that work builds, it creates a significant amount of heat. Mm-hmm. And that's the energy it's not the work creating heat, the yeast does. And that's the energy of the yeast. And it's a driving force as it's reacting, and eating your sugars and producing your alcohol. As that slows down, you're pulling energy out of them effectively by not raising the temperature around them. They're used to this high energy level, and that energy level is dying off, and they're kind of like, well, maybe I'm done if you're not bringing the temperature of your wort up separately. If you're not injecting some heat up as it's, especially towards finishing. And back to what Mike was saying, that's extremely yeast strain selection specific. Some yeasts can and need to be much warmer than others towards that finish, especially.
So you're saying, as my beer's fermenting, the yeast start putting out less heat, and then it kind of gets cold. Maybe the room is cooler, and then the yeast kind of go to sleep. And what I need to do is just add a little bit, keep them warm, maybe a heat wrap or something, temperature controlled heat wrap, keep warming them up. And there's an opposite side to that too. I think it was the first Saison I ever brewed or something like that. And I remember people telling me, oh yeah, you got to get that yeast warm. It won't attenuate. And, sure enough, the thing started slowing down, and it was just one of those yeast strains that will ferment really slowly for a long period of time. But it started slowing down, so I kept raising the temperature. I was like, man, sure does need a lot of heat. And I got up into the 90s, and it completely shut down around 93 degrees. It stopped fermenting entirely. When I cooled it back down, it started back up. So there's an upper limit to temperature too.
Yeah, what I like to remind people, especially people that are brewing, assuming Belgian Saison, but in that region, you're not going to have a whole lot of 93-degree days in Belgium.
Mm-hmm.
There's not going to be a whole lot of opportunity to have 93-degree fermentation in Belgium. And maybe there is today with modern everything is, air conditioning, et cetera. But back when these styles were originally being brewed, you weren't going to have a brewery that warm 93. Like you said, you went past what that yeast had been doing forever. Mm-hmm. You found the upper limit.
Yeah. And, people back then, they didn't brew when it was hot. They tended to brew when it was cooler. Mm-hmm. And, you'd get a better fermentation. Yeah. Yeah.
If I could just, my little 2 thoughts on the modern brewing science perspective is this heating of the beer after the initial fermentation, where you had your lag and your exponential growth phase. Once you start to get into that, state, it's moving in towards stationary phase. the new textbooks and stuff call it the maturation rest, where they'll purposely heat the wort. I usually go anywhere from 7 to 15 degrees, depending on if it's lager or ale. And for me, that is a intentional push of the reaction kinetics to try to speed up those yeasts that are running out of substrate to digest. And I'm trying to provide more energy for the reactions of the acetaldehyde conversion to alcohol and the reassimilation of diacetyl precursors and the attenuation and just consumption of sugars. So from the more technical perspective of the modern brewer, let's say that heating of that maturation rest, where if you don't have any heating way to heat it, like TC said, you stop cooling at least and let it free rise, and that push is a chemical kinetics kind of trying to increase those reaction rates as the yeast kind of run out of substrate.
Yeah, there's one thing you said, 7 to 15 degrees. For those not listening in the U.S. or those
that's
in the US who use that's Fahrenheit. I would normally go 2 to 3 degrees extra on ales. Maybe on lagers I'd go 5 to 8 towards the end from where I started. And I think the real important part is when you're controlling your beer temperature, control the beer temperature. Don't control the air around it. You want to have the probe on the beer attached to the fermenter or in the fermenter with a thermo well to make sure you're measuring the temperature of the beer, because if you measure the outside air, you'll keep the outside air at cool for fermentation, and then the yeast are slowing down, and this is what Travis was talking about. Then fermentation starts to slow. All right, let's see here. I think it is time for another break. When we come back, we'll have more about stuck fermentations. Maybe Travis, you can get into how you fix a stuck fermentation when we get back. All right, more about stuck fermentation right after this.
Learning to brew has never been so disgusting. This is Brew Strong.
All right, we're back. Talking stuck fermentations. It's something that happens to just about everybody. You guys have had stuck fermentations, right?
Yeah, I'm working on one right now.
Mine was at Boddington's. I was so frustrated. I had this beer I was in love with, and I loved the recipe, and I loved everything about it. It was going to be great, and then
how big a beer was it? That
I was going for 8.5, and I had like a 1077 wort, and it was kind of that borderline. Should I aerate it twice? And then the pitch wasn't ideal because of kind of an audible I pulled right at the freaking knockout, and I've learned my lesson since, but it was so frustrating because this beer was so close to being fantastic, but it just had that little bit of residual sweetness it wasn't a caramel sweetness. It was literally like a glucose sweet. It was like there was sugar in it. And it was like, God, I know that I screwed it up. And so it was a hazy. So it to the untrained palate, maybe I got away with it, but to me, I was really upset with myself. So
it's probably dry for the Houston area.
Yeah.
Got a lot of 4 and 5 bricks NEPAs around here.
I think this one finished at around 4.5, and it was like 23 points on the SG scale, and I wanted like 14, 13, 12. I kind of like my hazies to dry out a little bit. I just go for that. That's maybe a West Coast thing, but I want that kind of nice and flavorful, but it leaves you wanting more, So.
Absolutely.
Ah!
Yeah, so I've been brewing back to back with WLP 530 right now, and it seems to want to stall around 1020. Is that
Belgian wit?
No,
Or is that
530 is Belgian,
Abbey?
but not wit. I think it's Abiel.
Yeah, Abbey. Okay. Yeah, that one for me took its sweet ass time because I got a tilt on the one I made. It was a Belgian single, so it wasn't even very big,
Uh,
but
yeah.
I think it was on the yeast for like 24 days before I was like, I think it's done. It hasn't moved in a couple days, but it's just this. No, I'm not done. No, I'm still working.
Mm.
You know,
So I have a habit on all of my beers, Jamil, even ones that are going towards the end properly, where I start swirling the fermenter about once a day. And for this one, sticking around 1020, I'm doing the same thing. Um, yeah, the next thing I'm going to do on this is I'm probably going to hit it with a dose of oxygen. Um, I did the last one was Belgian blonde, and it is blonde as can be. I didn't get a brown beer because I put oxygen in it before, towards the end of its fermentation. 1020 really wasn't the end of its fermentation by a long shot. I got down to about 1006, so it had a good ways to go. No oxidation characteristics whatsoever. Uh, so I've not experimented with adding nutrients late in the game, probably because my main nutrient is zinc, and it's already so strong. I don't know if that's a good one to add late.
Well, yeah, amino acids, zinc. Generally you'd add that earlier on, but amino acids are the one that will help the yeast, finish fermenting. But the thing about amino acids is, if you chuck a whole bunch of amino acids in at the very beginning of when you're pitching your yeast, you'll get a lot more yeast growth, but they may not be able to finish fermentation later. So one of the tricks with amino acids, if you have a very high sugar content, simple sugars that do not bring any amino acids, it's not an all malt wort, and you want to add amino acids, you will add them. You can add a little bit at the beginning, maybe a third of them at the beginning, and then kind of a third into fermentation, add the other 2/3 of the amino acids, because then you get some growth and you get some healthy yeast going, but then you're going to provide the yeast with more amino acids to help them continue as alcohol levels rise, and they need to process those sugars. They use those amino acids for that. So that can be a real helpful thing to stagger your additions instead of chucking them all in at the beginning.
Right. Do you have a homebrew version of an amino acid like that you like to use versus whatever you probably use at Heretic for these massive beers you were making?
Oh,
Mike does.
Go ahead, Mike.
I mean, I like Fermento. Fermento's been great. It's kind of designed for wines, but if you're worried about amino nitrogen, that's a good one. And it's not like DAP where you could overdo it real easy.
Yeah,
because diammonium phosphate is so available, you could like almost, this is more of a horticulture term, but burn them, like kind of just give them way too much and way too fast. And
right. Then you'll end up just a ripping fermentation that tastes like, rocket fuel.
Yeah.
Fermento, it's a good one. There's several on the market now. And one of the things I was interested in was, looking at different amino acids for different flavors, because the type of amino acid will affect the flavors that the yeast produce. So different amino acids, different flavors. Some of them will make the beer more malty. Some of them will make it fruitier. Some of them will give you different kinds of alcohols, hotter alcohols, floral alcohols, things like that.
I remember a study that was going to be done about.
Yeah, but I think he was roping us into it, and so we didn't do it either.
Right.
Okay. Deal. But Travis, we're going to do this. All right.
Sounds good.
We need to start figuring this out.
The thing I want to do is do some homebrew sized batches, or I was going to go down to one of the commercial breweries and just ask them for 10 gallons of wort in 10 different jugs, and then try some dosing things and see how that affects the flavor of the the various beers, because there's the essential amino acids, and wort has most of them, but the concentrations affect the flavors. So I think it's a fascinating way to go. I was trying to get there's some commercial producers that are producing stuff like this where and I met the guy who I guess kind of developed it for them, and I'm like, yeah, come on, do a show, and he was like, nah, no interest. I'm like, all right. I'm just like, I'll help promote your product. I just, want to talk about the concept of, and they make it for like to make fruitier beers. And I had a friend of mine who's got a commercial brewery here, True Symmetry. I had him give it a try, order some and try it out. And it certainly did make a difference. So, what amino acids you use does make a difference.
And wasn't that the case where, at least I remember that episode where there were Group A, Group B, Group C, and like the uptake of the different amino acids was prioritized by yeast, and the different ones would give different flavors, and it was really interesting. I remember that episode. That would be so cool. And like even with like these stuck fermentations, maybe it's like, well, it's stuck, but maybe I could push a rose flavor or something. It's
I could Group A it. Yeah,
I can Group A it.
Yeah, I would definitely look at, there's some that don't get taken up, which are like half the concentration of amino acids, don't really get utilized at all. But there's quite a few that are very interesting. Yeah, I've been doing a presentation around that kind of goes over that. Let's see, where were we? Yeah, we're talking about fixing stuck fermentations. What else can you does it help to like throw in more yeast if I get another packet of dry yeast and just sprinkle it in there? Is that something I should do, Travis?
I don't know if I'd try it with the dry yeast, not rehydrated, etc. But making another starter, or well, if your yeast has fallen out, obviously it's given up on you. You can try pulling a sample of your own yeast and growing it up and putting it back in, but you might need a new healthy starter to dump in there. Mm-hmm. I've not tried. I've not brewed as much with dry yeast as I could have in a long time. I got away from it early on. I wasn't making good beer, and I blamed it on the yeast. Surely it was me. So I've never really gone back and experimented much with dry yeast. I do keep the WLP-001 dry on hand should I need it. So in this specific case, I could warm some up and put it in there, but I have not done that. Obviously, you'd have to rehydrate it very carefully. That's even a less friendly environment than all maltose wort would be. Now you've got alcohol in there.
Right.
But
it's just dropped and alcohol's up.
And if I could say again, whatever yeast you decide to use, I would highly recommend selecting a strain of yeast that is highly attenuative and also robust in an alcohol environment, like something is almost is purpose built for something that can live and be happy in high alcohol, low sugar, and keep going kind of stuff.
That's a great point, Mike, because in the case that you selected the yeast to start with that wasn't a higher attenuating yeast or wasn't good for the alcohol you were targeting, you don't want to try more of that yeast.
No, because you're kind of putting more. You're just kind of throwing the same thing at it, and it's not going to change.
Well, and assuming you've mostly fermented out, you've gotten to 80% of fermentation. A lot of the flavor of fermentation's been developed. It's in there. A lot of it happens early on. So adding another yeast late in, that's a clean ale yeast like, Cali Ale or, the high gravity.
San Diego super yeast.
Yes, something like that. It's not really going to affect the flavor much. I don't think you're going to really notice a huge impact from that and say, oh, yeah, it doesn't have, my fermentation flavors. Because most of that flavor should already be there. what it'll do is dry it out so the flavors really become more pronounced. And so I think that, something like that, I wouldn't worry too much. I know a lot of people throw in some wine or champagne yeasts, but some of those will struggle with maltose. So it just depends. Whatever yeast you use, you're going to want to make sure it's good with long chain, sugars, and
there's other. I know of. I think it's Sierra Nevada when they do the bottle conditioning for like pale ale. They're not using the same yeast they fermented that beer with to get the conditioning done, because they select a yeast that they know will be happy and really use all the sugar they add. And so just another food for thought of like, there's professionals that will select a different yeast to pitch to a post fermented beer for even conditioning stuff. So
yeah, one of the things about those wine yeasts, they're really selected for being able to ferment simple sugars, fructose. So when you feed them maltose, they don't tend to do as well. So generally a brewer's yeast that can handle high gravity is a good way to go. Let's see here. All right. Tom was asking, or commenting, he says, for beer, I'm just using Cerevisices, DAP, and Fermade for sugar-based ferments, not from malt. Yeah, I mean, that sounds pretty good to me. Cerevisices, you're getting some zinc. DAP, if it's, all sugar, you're going to need DAP is fine. And Fermade comes in several varieties, some without, a DAP free, and some with, and some that are organic, and some that are not. So I think he says for meads.
Yeah, these are nutrient deficient musts.
Yes,
if you will, that need supplementation usually.
And one of those things about it is, again, timing. So I wouldn't throw it all in at the beginning. It used to be people talked about dosing like daily or every other day, and that can work too. Small amounts every other day. I think that a lot of testing has been done now by some of the manufacturers, and they're saying, 1/3 of the way into fermentation is kind of the ideal time to hit it with more of that. So I did a mead not too long ago, and I hit it, I think, every other day. Yep. And fermented out fully, no problem. Nice strong mead.
Did you see the airlock activity cycling with as you dosed it?
Yeah. You'd see a little burst. Part of it is don't be confused when you add something like this. I would sanitize it in hot water first and then add it, And so it's a little bit warm. You add it in, you'll see some evolution of CO2 as you add stuff like that in, or if you add powdered or whatever.
I was thinking more hours to a day later, that instantaneous, you're giving it nucleation points, etc.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That evening or the next day, you'd see it was continuing to chug along pretty good. So, that's another way to do it as well. All right. So let's say we talked about pitching more yeast. We talked about adding oxygen. Maybe racking it to another fermenter to kind of stir everything up and add some more oxygen. We talked about swirling the fermenter, raising the temperature. What about, let's say all those things don't work. Is there like one last thing I could do that might, save this beer for me?
But yeah, if you're close, you can brew again. Brew a drier version, blend it back. You'd have to be within a certain window, obviously, because you're diluting it to a degree. You're still going to have some of what didn't finish up in there, which is
Right.
fine. But
Uh-huh.
you might have also inadvertently had a higher mash than expected. So you really are closer than you think to terminal. So brewing another version, blending it back, it's an option.
Can I do a forced ferment of this? Let's say it's stuck already. I didn't do my forced ferment earlier. Can I take this stuck beer and then try doing a forced ferment with it with maybe some new yeast and see how much lower I could get before
Absolutely.
getting to it? Oh, okay. And
Yeah.
then what? So if I'm brewing another beer, then uh, I guess I'd brew it to a lower gravity, and then I could blend them while at the height of fermentation. This thing's ripping along. My new one, blend in the one that didn't completely attenuate. Maybe get some more attenuation, or should I just brew the beer and then blend the two and end up at the right finishing gravity overall?
Well, you're almost poisoning in that first respect if you have the space. So you're putting so much of a fermenting wort in there to help
You'd have
finish
to
it
have a
out.
double sized fermenter for that then.
Right. Yeah. So if you're a good bit off, that's the much better option. It's like a starter, but it's better. It's larger. It can be if you have the space for it. But if you're closer, you might as well finish them out separately and come back and blend them to taste if you can.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I knew a guy. He had this technique where he'd just go out in the front yard and just dump it.
Yep. That's a technique I use often. That's my favorite technique. Pitch the junk. Just move on. Like a
Yeah,
bad relationship. Just cut ties.
I think at the end of this, the last thing is I live by this, and Jamil, I think you said this on this show many times, is one of two things is going down the drain.
Yeah.
That beer or your reputation.
That's right.
There you go.
Tom had another suggestion. He said, now this would be if you're like Mike was saying, if your mash temperature was way off and you screwed up some other way and it just wasn't an actual fermentable beer somehow. Then he said he's added alpha amylase. It's kind of a last ditch effort. You can take some Beano tablets, crush them up, sprinkle them in there, and it will break apart, and it'll keep working, and it'll break apart the longer chain sugars into simpler chain, and then you can eke out some more attenuation out of it.
I would see it now. Bear in mind, I'm using my chemical background, my chemistry background is because I haven't done this, but I would imagine that if you pitch an enzyme in a sufficient amount to reduce or cleave those sugars, it's going to keep going, and you're going to end up with an empty shell of what you want. And it's just, I mean, if you want to end up with a light beer, or at least in terms of body and flavor, because it's going to go for everything. Any type of sugar in there that it can get a hold of, and that amylase site is open to it, it's going to cleave it. So yeah, you might push this fermentation, but you might end up with something you're going to the other side of the aisle where the beer has quote unquote over attenuated, and you're getting an overly dry, flavorless, bodiless skeleton.
Yeah, I'd say if it was a beer that was designed to be a very dry finishing beer, then
Yes.
you're good with that. If it's a beer that was supposed to finish at 10:15 or 10:16 and it's at 10:32 and use like a imperial stout, then that could be bottle bombs waiting to happen, or it could end up really dry. But if you're gonna like distill it anyways or something, then all right.
Yeah, or you were looking at dumping it and just want to send it, see what happens.
Yeah. It doesn't cost much to give it a shot versus just dumping it. All right. Let's take one last break, and then we're going to wrap up with kind of like how you prevent these things from happening in the first place. It's kind of like some good practice to ensure you don't have stuck fermentation. We'll be back right after this.
Back to the beer guys that make other beer guys look like wine guys. Brew strong.
All right, we're back. We're talking stuck fermentation. So, Travis, what kind of things can we do to avoid this whole mess in the first place? What should I be doing to keep this from happening?
Well, if I start off again from starting home brewers, the thing I hate to tell a new home brewer is you need to invest in fermentation temperature control because it's a bit of a jump. I mean, if you spent, I say $100, someone's probably laughing at me because it probably costs a whole lot more than $100 for a new kit these days. But way back when, I got a carboy and a couple buckets for $100 with a 4-gallon pot. And then someone tells me I have to do temperature control. Well, the controller might be cheap, but what I'm controlling is not cheap. But temperature control, that's the hump I want everyone to get over so they can properly control their fermentation temperature. Back to what you said, you want to control the temperature of the wort, not the environment.
And I cannot say this enough to any new brewer out there, intermediate, even advanced, if you haven't learned yet, which you should have. Temperature control of your fermentation is probably one of the most, if not the most, besides pitch rate and health of the yeast, factor in producing great beer. I think I'm a student of Jamil, and I will say this, 80% of beer flavor comes from fermentation. And if you are not controlling that fermentation with pitch rate, yeast health, and temperature, you can make the best wort in the world. You can have it exactly the way the Germans did it 400 years ago, and you're going to have a piece of junk at the end if you're not doing these things.
Absolutely.
So,
okay, so temperature control. What else?
Proper yeast nutrition, which goes not quite hand in hand, but it's all, again, as Mike just opined, it's all about fermentation, and the yeast. So proper nutrition for the yeast. Again, going back to your nutrients. If you're doing nutrients, evaluate what your nutrients are, and if you're not doing nutrients, get into the game. You don't use much. They're not expensive. It's an easy addition to what you're doing.
Okay, all right. So make sure I've got enough free amino nitrogen. Make sure I've oxygenated or aerated, maybe a little bit of zinc. Okay.
Key, a little bit of zinc, a little bit.
All right. What else?
So you need to learn about what you're expecting from the beer, from the wort, to know if you do actually have the stuck fermentation. I'm a big fan of the forced ferments. Mike doesn't do so many, but I think Mike's probably dialed in the beers he's doing. I just got in the habit of doing a forced ferment. I mean, I did the same beers over and over for quite a while, and I was still doing it. And I'm venturing off a little bit more now. And it's a habit. As I said, I overfill the fermenter so I know I can pull some out and I have it going on. Right. And also because I don't get a perfect transfer from my kettle to my fermenter, I know I'm going to get some trub in there. So I pull the trub down, I pull a little extra wort out of there, and that's my forced ferment. It just became part of my process.
Yeah. And it pretty much ensures that before you even pitch the yeast, where you're going to, as soon as you pitch the yeast, pretty much where you're going to end up or should end up. If there's a problem, you know. So like on this one with the 530 yeast, where should that one end up? Where are you stuck now?
Right. It's a good yeast. Just got to learn how to handle it.
Yeah. It's like a savage beast.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, what about the yeast before pitching? Is there anything I should be doing with my yeast to ensure that, things are going to work out?
Yeah, absolutely. I do starters and I repitch. When I do repitch, I wake up the repitch and all of that. I see growth. I see viability of the yeast. A proof test of sorts. I can't talk much about dry yeast proof, and maybe one of you guys can say something about it. But equally important, know that the yeast you're using is valid yeast. It's quality. It's healthy yeast.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
I would say, in my experience with dry yeast, the vitality they've really come leaps and bounds. I do the little just sprinkle on the wort, and some of these like dry yeasts have taken off. I actually have gotten to the point where I don't mind sprinkling dry yeast on a wort. I really don't like pitching liquid yeast straight out of the pouch. I want to start it. I want to get it back up and running and growing, and then I'll pitch it, because for whatever reason, the refrigerated live cultures, they go to sleep and then they kind of go into dormant and they don't want to wake up. But the techniques they're using now to put these things into a dry place, and they wake up, they're ready to go. I mean, I make a lot of beers with the Kvikes and stuff that are dry, and man, they just go to town. They don't need to be started. They don't need to be rehydrated. They go. So that's where I'm at with dry yeast, at least.
Well, if you like using Kvike yeast, yeah.
Right. See, I wasn't going to say that, Jamel.
I do. Hey, I don't get me started on Kvike. People really took that yeast and just abused it.
Well, that was what was going around, right? Abuse it. That's how you use it.
No. These things are beautiful, and they make very, very beautiful beers.
Take that thing and spank it.
Yeah, just, it puts the lotion on the skin.
Yeah. There you go.
No,
all right.
On that note,
yeah, good job, Travis. It's very, very interesting and very informative. Thank you all for listening. If you enjoy the show, make sure you check out our fine sponsor, Blickman Engineering. You can find them on the web, blickmanengineering.com. Good old Drew Barnes. He's paying for this show, so you don't have to. I think the least you could do is send him a little email, tappity-tap on your keyboard. Takes you just a couple of minutes to say, hey, thank you for sponsoring the show. I listen, I enjoy it, I learn from it. I'll always keep Blickman Engineering in my mind, or whatever. They make a lot of great stuff. They've been, changing the homebrew landscape through their innovation for a long time. And Drew is, right at the forefront of that. So send him a nice note. Tell them thank you. We certainly appreciate it after 17 years of doing this.
I think, yeah, you get up there.
So there you go.
They're the best.
Yeah. All right. If you're listening live, stay tuned, because we have a live Q&A show coming right up. I don't know if these guys need to go to the bathroom or something, but, there you go. But it'll be just a couple of minutes, just so we won't cut the feed or anything on Facebook. You can just keep watching. And go get yourself a beer or something. Come back. We're going to do some live Q&A. We'll answer your questions that you have entered into the chat, like Tom and Merlinus and a couple other people have done. And we also have questions that you have sent in via email, which you can send to brewstrong@thebrewingnetwork.com. And the new questions, we're getting to them, pretty much the very next show. And we have not forgotten the questions from many years ago. We are getting on those too. So we will make sure to answer every question that's ever been sent in. That is my promise to you. It will take some time, but we will get there. But the new ones, we're getting right on them, so you don't have to wait a decade to get your question answered.
Front load.
All right. Okay. All right. Let's call it a show then. Until then, brew strong, everyone.
Brew strong.
Brew strong.